Alright, so if you were here for our last video, you know that we're in cottage country here in Prince Edward Island on Canada's east coast, and the seafood is both abundant and delicious, as demonstrated by that amazing lobster roll we made, and that's, linked down below. Anyways, while we're still here, we're going to take advantage and make one of the simplest but most delicious seafood dishes out there, and that is, of course, Pan Seared Scallops. Now, when I'm talking about scallops, I'm not talking about those bitty tiny bay scallops. I'm talking about these big boy, meaty, and delicious sea scallops. Now, as you can see, these are quite large and they are perfect for pan searing. But before we do any searing, let's get a few ground rules down first. Number 1, and I'll say it again because it bears repeating, get sea scallops, not bay scallops. Number 2, make sure your scallops are at room temperature and that you pat them dry. Frozen or wet scallops won't sear properly, and if we don't get a nice sear, well, you get put in the timeout corner where you belong. Number 3, don't play with them when they're in the pan, guys, just let them sear properly. You should only flip these once and then that is it. So with the ground rules out of the way and our scallops neatly organized and nicely dried, it's time to cover a few additional and somewhat optional ingredients. First on that list is going to be a lemon, and yes, this is the other half of the lemon that we used for our lobster roll, but waste not, want not, am I right? Anyways, you'll want the zest from this lemon as well a bit of the juice to finish. Next, for a bit of color and to go nicely with that little bit of acid, we're going to have a nice herbaceous note, and you'll want a few sprigs of fresh basil as well as stalks of fresh parsley. And that's it. And there are 1,000 different ways that you could prepare scallops, but this is a combination that I really enjoy. But of course, you could use just salt and pepper, or, well, nothing if that's what you're into. So with the optional stuff covered, let's cover the not so optional ingredients. And to start, that's going to include some butter. Now, I've got around 10 scallops, so I'll be using roughly 1 large tablespoon of butter. Next, you'll need salt and pepper to season. I'd recommend proper sea salt and freshly ground black pepper from a pepper mill, but this is all I've got to work with, so that's what we're going to use. And guys, that covers pretty much everything you're going to need for this amazing, delicious, and simple recipe. Which reminds me, you know what else is amazing and delicious? B-roll. Okay, with that tasty B-roll out of the way, let's get moving on our prep. So to start, grab yourself a microplane and begin zesting your lemon. Now for those keen of sight, you'll notice that I am indeed not using a microplane because I don't have one here. But you can just take your knife and finely dice your zest into a smaller size, and it should look something a little bit like this. Next, grab your basil and roll that up along with some parsley. Then give us a very fine chop or chiffonade for those who are the fancy among us. And dang, look at them chopping skills. Anyways, once you've sliced and diced your way through your herbs, you should have something that looks a little bit like this. Next, in an attempt to make our final plate a little bit prettier, we're going to take a few thin slices from our lemon. Well shoot, ain't that the cutest thing you've ever seen? Okay, so with the poor attempt at a southern accent aside, go ahead and place your lemon slice to the side and start putting down your dry scallops because we need to season these bad boys up. So to that end, you're going to grab your ancient salt shaker and go ahead and season every single scallop. Then just do the same with your pepper. Now you can see I only did this on one side here because I wanted to season in the pan later, but in hindsight, I'd actually recommend seasoning your scallops fully on both sides before hitting the pan. And speaking of pans, go ahead and get your pan on a medium-high heat. Then add in around 1 to 2 teaspoons of a neutral oil and let that get up to temp. With the oil appropriately heated, start placing your scallops gently into the pan. You'll notice I'm being very deliberate here with how I place each scallop down, and that's because putting them down in this clockwise order actually helps you remember in what order to flip them a little bit later. And that's a free pro kitchen tip there for you. After about 90 seconds, or once a nice crust has formed, go ahead and grab the absolute worst grabby tool that you can find. Yeah, like this one. With the grabby tool in hand, start to flip these over gently. You should have a nice sear and a golden brown color. From here, just go ahead and add some more seasoning to taste, and then add your 1 tablespoon of butter and begin to quickly baste your scallops. Now you could also add the butter at the beginning with the oil to prevent it from burning, but I decided to go with it here and baste. Now with this close-up, guys, you can see this scallop does have a golden brown color. It's totally ready to eat, but it doesn't have the sear or the crust that we're looking for. So I'm gonna place this back in the pan for another 30 seconds or so, and once you have that crust, these are done and it's time to plate these up. So grab your white plate and realize that the scallops will barely show up on camera, and then place down a piece of lettuce or two, for contrast. Then quickly grab your scallops and place them in whatever pattern or pile you see fit before decorating them with our lemon slices, which we work so hard for. Then you're going to gently top it all off with our beautifully thin herbs and a small pinch of that lemon zest. And voila, your pan seared scallops are done. So naturally, the only thing left to do is taste test, and the one thing I can say is that while these have the right color and texture, I would recommend a stronger sear to develop a better crust. But that said, these things are still super delicious. You get this amazing combination of a slight crunch on the outside with a silky, springy texture on the inside. The natural sweetness from these scallops combines so perfectly with that richness from the butter and that little bit of brightness from the lemon. And frankly, it's just a really hard combination to beat, and you're going to have some difficulty putting this plate down or effectively sharing with anyone around you. So there you have it, a classic, simple, and delicious recipe that really allows the scallops to shine. It only takes a few minutes to make, and it's well worth giving this recipe, or your favorite variant, an honest shot in the kitchen. I promise you will not be disappointed. And with that, guys and gals, we've come to the end of this recipe and this video. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. We will see you in the next one.